Hey guys, this is Tyson Kidd, and you're listening to Count It Out with Mike and Tyler.
You are listening to Count It Out with Mike and Tyler.
Well, we are live, pals, and welcome to another edition of the Bill After Seal of Approve Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. My name is Tyler, and I just want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Hope you've had a great Christmas break so far, and a happy New Year as we roll into next week. Next week is part one of my favorite shows of the year. It is our big year-end show, 7 guests, 7 different topics. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited for it. We really put together another great list of guests for everybody, but that will be to be seen for next week. This week, however, we are going to go back in our archives a little bit. It's Christmas time, we don't want to go too crazy with recording a lot of new content. We want to enjoy some time with our family. But speaking of families, one of the most legendary families in all of professional wrestling is the Hart family. Now, we've had many guests come on our show over the last couple of years, and they've told some stories about the patriarch of the Hart family, and that is the one and only, the legendary Mr. Stu Hart. So on this week's show, we are going to go back. We're going to listen to some fantastic Stu Hart stories. We're going to be hearing from such people this week like Bill Apter, Bronwyn Billington, Paul the Butcher Vachon, Dory Funk Jr., Greg Gagne, Jack Evans, Jacques Rougeau, TJ Wilson, and the man who may have the best Stu Hart impersonation of all, Johnny Devine. It's going to be a great show. Very excited for this one. Very excited for next week. Just want to thank everybody again for all the support over the year. You guys are wonderful. Mike and I really appreciate everybody that takes some time out of their lives and listens to Count Out with Mike and Tyler. Do us a favor if you can. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, on Spotify. Help us out here. We've got some big plans coming into the new year. As always, we want to try to keep growing, keep getting bigger and better, and we can't do that without you. So again, happy holidays to everybody. Hope you guys have a great time with friends and family or whatever you're doing to celebrate. And let's get to some fun with Mr. Stu Hart. Cheers. Do you have some fun Stu stories you can tell? Who do you think has the best Stu impersonation also? Because for us, Johnny Devine is the best one I've heard.
Johnny Devine, yeah. You'd have a pretty good one.
My personal favorite so far was Paul Vachon, because as much as Paul Vachon tried to do a Stu impression, he didn't have to do a Stu impression. He already sounds like Stu.
Yeah,
That was cool.
Brett has a pretty good one.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the best one, but it was just like the fact that he did it and did it in this little moment with me, myself, Natty, and Harry. Vince did a Stu impression once to us. Wow. It was like the 3 of us, the 4 of us. But so that was cool. That doesn't get too much cooler than Vince McMahon doing a Stu Hart impression. Well, there's just the 4 of us in a little half circle or whatever. It's kind of cool.
How was the impression though?
So his was funny. His was more of one from someone that's met Stu. You could tell. Stu would kind of like shake a guy's hand, and if it was like a really big guy, Stu would almost like grab their arm and almost like feel like their tricep, almost like he didn't, not so much the bicep, but the tricep, which I've noticed. Like, I don't know if it's an amateur wrestling thing, but and then you'd start gauging like, hey, you got pretty good arms, and like so Vince did an imitation like that to us. It was so funny because it was out of nowhere. We were shaking his hand after that. We had this promo class at the time where we go to shake his hand after, and then he did that and did like a little Stu impression. It was pretty funny.
Oh, that's awesome.
Everyone that was around him could kind of do it. Not bad. I'm trying to think if I've heard Harry's recently, because Harry is a master of imitation. So Harry or Brett, I would just off the top of my head say.
Yeah.
Bruce Hart had a pretty good stew as well.
Something I'd love to ask you about from your childhood growing up, the famous Sunday Hart family dinners. What was it like going? I'm sure there was a million people there, cats running around. You always hear about it. What are some of your fun memories of being younger and going to the Hart family dinners?
Yeah, so they had this huge mansion up in Calgary, and there was Cadillacs all around. Stu had loved Cadillac cars, and they were just everywhere. They must have had, I don't know, 50 of them or something. And we used to just play in them as kids too, just like pretending to drive them. And, there'd be the wrestling ring in the field and wrestlers would be wrestling or training. And then of course the dungeon in the basement, there was always screaming coming from down there. And I was absolutely terrified of those stairs. If you've ever seen it in documentaries, they're like really spiky metal stairs going down that are like just so dangerous. So just going down those stairs, I was like so scared as a kid. And yeah, the dinners were just immaculate. Lots of meat and lots of people. They had a huge table in the living room where all the adults would eat. And then there'd be another table where all the kids would eat. And it was just always a great time. We'd stay up pretty late. And I can remember watching cartoons. Like there'd be a TV with cartoons on, which is like the raccoons. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember the raccoons. Yeah, I love the raccoons.
Like bring me back to the Hart house. Like the raccoons is one thing.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of my grandparents' house as well. On the Sunday nights, I'd always see the raccoons on, and then that would usually be the time we'd have to go home though, and I'd be all sad. Yeah, that's so funny. That must be a Canadian thing, I think, the raccoons.
Totally. Well, Sunday night. There you go.
There you go. Perfect, right? So, while we're talking about Stu and Helen as well, do you have any fun memories or any fun stories I can share? We always hear a lot of Stu Hart stories, but do you have any fun memories with Helen? I feel like that she doesn't get as much of the fun stories out there as Stu does.
Yeah, she was just such a lovely, gentle woman. And she, even though not blood related, totally considered us all like us Billingtons family. So she just treated us like gold. And my mom told me like she learned manners from Helen because Helen was very proper. And I think they even took like etiquette classes with Helen. So that's just how like lovely she was. And like, because my mom moved here at such a young age, right? She moved here at 15. She left home. And then Helen just really took her under her wing and, she really became a part of the family. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you always hear how warm the Hart family was and how welcoming they were. And I'm so proud being a Canadian hearing that as well, because I really think that the Harts are the first family of Canada as far as I'm concerned. So
they were very welcoming and to anyone. You didn't even
and then while we're still talking about Stu, any fun memories with Stu? Do you have a Stu impersonation? I know a lot of people like to do the Stu impersonation.
My mom does the best one. You'll have to get her on here sometime.
Oh, I would love that.
Do impersonations. I'm awful, so I won't even try.
Johnny Devine is the best Stu impersonation I've heard so far. We had him on the show and he was telling some fantastic Stu stories. Yeah,
I just saw him on Friday at the Real Canadian Wrestling.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You have to ask him next time to do a Stu impersonation. You close your eyes and you would think that it would be, he's fantastic at it.
Yeah, I can just remember Stu always, like, to the very end, they had it was a big house, so there was a lot of stairs going upstairs to his bedroom. And he, to the very end, would take those stairs, like never was in a wheelchair or anything like that. So he just kept on giving her, and that's what I really remember about him. He would come down those stairs like backwards. That's how he came down safely. Mm-hmm. And I bet you he still went down to the dungeon to the very end.
Oh, of course. And I don't think I would want to be down there no matter what age Stu was. I think that right. he would still teach you a lesson down there for sure.
All right. I want to start off, Bill. You don't have to do this in one word. Just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say these names.
Okay.
I'm going to start with Stu Hart.
Stu used to call me, or I'd call him, and I tell him I only have a minute. For 20 minutes, he'd be going, I used to go to school with your boss, and he Ed more than any human being other than my grandfather. I was with Stu and Helen at one of their last appearances at Madison Square Garden. I went up to their hotel room, and they gave me an autographed baseball cap.
Oh, wow.
They signed. I have that down in Actors Alley. Yeah.
That's fantastic. You mentioned the name Stu Hart there, and we're a couple guys from Toronto. We love us the Hart family here in Canada. Did you?
Well, you do.
Yeah, he's they've been known to be pretty over in this neck of the woods. Did you or your dad have a lot of interaction with Stu at all? Because like
I didn't, but my dad did.
yeah, what was your dad's thoughts on Stu? Did he ever tell you any good Stu Hart stories? Those
Oh
are two of
God,
the
yeah.
toughest guys going, right?
Stu was a dandy. One story I remember, the newspaper guy came over to interview Stu about wrestling. And Stu had cats in the house. And they're at the kitchen table, and the guy's asking Stu questions, and the cat's down there, and Stu keeps looking over at the cat. And you kind of go, Jesus, what? And the guy's interviewing him. And all of a sudden, he picks the cat up by the back of the neck, pulls him up, lifts his tail up, smells his ass, and he said, he's okay. Well, that almost ended the interview.
I tell you, there's a lot of dream matches that people talk about in this world, but I think Vern Gagne versus Stu Hart inside that Hart dungeon or inside the Gagne barn, I don't think there's enough money in the world that people would pay to see that. That's phenomenal right there. I had something I didn't know, but did you spend some time in Stampede Wrestling during the really early days in your career with Stu?
And that's when I started. And actually, my first territory, it's funny because I'd start wrestling around the age of 15 years old in little backyard arenas, maybe 50 people, 100 people. And then when I got to the age of 17, I decided it was time for me to hit the road. And I remember telling my dad, hey, I think I'm going to go to Calgary. I think I'd like to go to Calgary. There's a territory there and stuff. And so my dad had looked at me and he says, are you serious? You soaking wet, you weigh about 180 pounds, so it says, you're not ready for this. And I said, yeah, I'm ready, Dad. I'm a high flyer, I'm not a big monster, but I'm good in the ring. And so finally, my father didn't agree with it. So I went to see my mom without my dad knowing. And I borrowed $500 from my mom. And I called Stu Hart up. And it was so funny because when I called Stu, his father, I said, Mr. Hart? And he says, yeah, who's this there? And I said, well, it's Jimmy Rougeau, Jacques Rougeau, but my English name is Jimmy. I said, Jimmy Rougeau, are you a part of that Rougeau family there, Jacques and Johnny? And I said, yeah, it's my father and my uncle. Okay, we'll try you out there. And so I took the $500 of my mom and I flew to Calgary, and I stayed at the St. Regis Hotel where all the Indians and the whores were living at. It was a poor place, but I had to get something that was cheap, to survive. And it wasn't my kind of life at all, but that was the only place where I'd pay I think it was like $115 for the whole week, so I had to pay trans and everything. But then Brett was just driving the bus at the time. He wasn't even wrestling yet. He wasn't into wrestling. And what a great territory, because he had so much respect for my dad, Stu. And at the beginning, I thought because on Sundays, when we had a day off on Sundays, he was inviting me to go eat at his house with the I think it was 15 kids. I don't know, maybe there's a lot of them. And it says and about 20,000 cats. But anyway, so we got into the house, and he would always invite me on the Sunday to go have a lunch. But then I realized after a while that every time we'd finish lunch, or he'd say, you should come downstairs there. We got a little dungeon down there, and we could see how you take care of yourself there. And I was going, and I'm an artiste, I never was a fighter in life. So I was always avoiding the dungeon downstairs. I never made it downstairs.
Smart man.
Yeah, that's what I heard. But anyway, but what a great man and what a great family. And so that was my first territory. I went at the age of 17 years old, actually in 77. I was born in 60. So 77, I went there for about 3 months. And then from there, I came back to Montreal. And then I went back in 78 for another 3 months. And then from there, I went to Mexico at the age of 18. And then I started on the road doing all small territories. I went to Kansas City. I was going to Knoxville for the Fullers, Grahams, Florida, and Pensacola for the Fullers. And then TBS with Ole Anderson and Tommy Rich and Wahoo McDaniel and Thunderbolt Patterson. And so I always went from territory. But you never forget your first territory. And I remember Kazavubu, you probably don't know who he is, and Oki Shakina and John Foley, guys that were there, like veterans that were there at the Patty Ryan. I'm trying to think of all the guys that was there, Hubert Gallant, and but there was so much good talent, but friendly talent, So it was a great place to start to really enjoy wrestling and to love what you're doing. And I'll always be thankful and grateful to Stu for what he did to me.
Yeah, Stu, we just love hearing Stu Hart stories, and your impersonation is up there with one of the best that we've heard on the show so far. So that was pretty bang on. That was pretty bang on.
I used to laugh at it so much when he wasn't there. I used to laugh at it so much. Like I said, "Wow, this guy's a character," but it was awesome, and it really was.
Well, you guys spent some time out in Stampede Wrestling, right, with Stu Hart?
Oh yeah.
What was your time like in Calgary?
Well, actually, it was great. And did you hear that story about Stu Hart was an old-time amateur wrestler, and he had a gym in his basement. And him and his wife had been married like, 15 years, and they had like 14 kids.
Yeah, sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, right. It does. Yeah, it sounds like my family. You're absolutely right. And I used to talk to his wife about my mother and my family and everything. And in any case, he had really wanted to ask for us to wrestle for him in Calgary because he was not for amateur wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved amateur wrestlers, but the one he liked most of all, he liked to take new guys in the territory and take them down to his basement on Sunday, because when we were there, we wrestled 6 nights a week, but never on Sunday. And he liked to take the new guys and take them on the mat and put all sorts of give up holds on them and make them give up. And that's what gave him. He was a weird guy,
Did you ever get Did you ever get down there with Stu? Did he ever get a wrestle with you?
Hey, listen, I'm the one that's telling the story, so let me finish it.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
I'm joking. So anyway, we knew what he wanted to do. He had invited us in the gym, and we had been there, working out in the gym and everything. But he invited us on a Sunday, and he said, "I want to show you my place, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "I know you guys like to work out, so you go down to the gym and I'll be down there." And anyway, so Bad Dog says, he knows I'm an Olympic wrestler and a gold medalist in the British Empire. He says he's not going to want to wrestle with me. But he says he wants to wrestle with you because he thinks that you're the weakest of us both. He says, so when we hear him come down, he says we'll wrestle one another. And he says, you be all over me. He says, don't let me get away with nothing. And we'll wrestle for about 5-6 minutes and then see what happens. And Mad Dog had him pegged right away.
Wow.
I mean,
so smart.
when the minute we heard him come down the steps, he's got his trunk, and he says, I come down to see if I can get a work on with Paul here. And Mad Dog says, well, you're going to wait a while because we're having a work on right now. And he says, in a few minutes, I'll let you have him. And then we got back to wrestling with one another, and Mad Dog let me ride him all over the place. I mean, I turned him every way but loose. You know, I had a front face lock on him, wouldn't let him go, and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, Stu's eyes bugged out, and he said, I hear Helen calling me, I'll be back. And he never came back, of course, and we knew.
Oh, that's so smart.
And after that, after that, I was all right with Stu. I mean, he wouldn't have done anything for the Marchand brothers, you know.
Oh, that's incredible to hear. Two legendary families like that. Such an incredible story. I recently just watched a match that you had against Bret Hart. It looked like in Maple Leaf Gardens. What was your memories about Bret? How did you think he was in the ring?
Actually, he was quite a guy. I mean, you know, he was nothing like his father. His father, when to wrestle in front of people, he could not have taken some and give some, you know, make it an even match or anything like that, make it interesting. It was against his principles, you understand?
Mm-hmm.
But Bret Hart and all the Hart boys that wrestled, they were all very good wrestlers, nothing like their dad. And they were good people, too.
Oh, that's great to hear.
And so was the dad. He was a hell of a man. But he was a show off to show his amateur skills, which is not what made him a millionaire, but professional wrestling.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, I'm judging him a bit, but
oh, that's okay. I gotta ask one more question about your time in Calgary. I'm a sucker for Stu Hart and a good Stu Hart story. Did you ever get to spend a lot of time around Stu? Did he ever get his hands on you and stretch you out a bit? Or do you have any good Stu stories at all?
A little bit. I might have been the last guy to get stretched, but it wasn't in the dungeon because his knees had gotten really bad. So like the dungeon stairs, like to get there from the kitchen, it was super steep and they were metal, so that like he very rarely went down there. But he did get his hands on me, and he did this move. I can't even remember how it goes exactly now, called the thread through. I remember, and like even as old man, it'll just trip you up, like just the leverage he puts on it. And then after that, he grabs you, but he didn't stretch me like armbar style, but like he would just like, oh man, he had the craziest grip strength for how old he was. I'm talking like could crush a coconut style. Like he just never lost his grip strength, but he was all more about like twisting you and everything. And so I got that a little bit, but on the kitchen floor. But the worst thing, and he would show me repeatedly this, and I started to know it was coming. But if you don't like a guy or he does something to you, like little tricks, specifically in the lockup that you could do, and one of them was like switching sides with your forehead and just like smashing your forehead against the guy's nose. So I took that one multiple times, and that one is the one that actually like hurt the most, like eye-watering, like, oh man. Yeah, so I got to hang out with Stu a bit. But like I said, towards the end, his knees got so bad, and even to get down to the kitchen, you had to get to go downstairs and everything. So he started to come around less and less.
Yeah.
But like when Helen was still alive and stuff, he actually came around a fair amount. He would come down for Sunday dinner, because every Sunday the Harts would hold dinner. And yeah, so I got to spend some time with him. You know what he was actually the craziest at? The absolute craziest? How specific he could guess your weight.
Really?
I'm talking like, yeah, like he knew with it, and I would wear, especially that time, like baggy clothes and stuff. I think it'd be harder, but he would guess. I was 163 at that time, and I think he guessed 161 or something. But that was like something you do whenever he met someone new. Like it was almost like his introduction to him is he would guess their weight, and it's just so crazy. I don't know. This is just a weird little story about him, but is that it was just so crazy how good he was at guessing people's weights. I know that sounds weird, but it was actually pretty amazing to witness.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Who's got the best Stu impersonating that you ever heard? We had Johnny Devine on, and he had a pretty good one. He's got to be top of my list, I think.
When it comes to impersonations, Harry, I think.
I know when you were the champion and touring around the world, you got to spend some time in Calgary with Stampede Wrestling. Did you have a lot of interaction with Stu Hart? Do you have any great Stu Hart stories that you could talk about with us? We just love a good Stu Hart story over here.
You know, I had heard so much about Stu Hart and the basement, and to watch out for the basement, the dungeon.
The dungeon, yeah.
the basement, the dungeon. But I had heard so much about bad things that could happen, such as Stu Hart asking you to get on your hands and knees and then jumping you from behind, things like that. So I was leery about going down to the basement. But in the end, I was never treated with so much respect from his kids. And he had 12 kids. And from Stu Hart, he was a tremendous influence on professional wrestling.
I feel like I always tell the same story because it's kind of the first thing that always comes to mind is he would just pull all of our ponytails, like as a little girl, if we had our hair in a ponytail. I was like, oh my God, no, I'm going to Stu's house. Like, Mom, take my ponytail out, because he would just kind of like yank on it. He's just like, he had such big hands, and he's like not meaning to be rough, but he's used to wrestling down in the dungeon and putting men in holds. So our little girl holds were like a little ponytail shrug. Yeah.
Yeah. Stu.
I'm not good at doing impersonations, but my mom is.
Your mom's got a good Stu?
Yeah. But yes, she does. She can do like all the hearts.
Well, we're gonna have to get your mom on next time with you.
Yeah. So, and I can just remember him, at to the very end, he was walking, and then the house they lived in, like the stairs, there's stairs in the kitchen that go upstairs, like right to his bedroom. And he would just like hobble down those little stairs, up and down those stairs. And it's like, but he would do it, right? Even though you're old and you probably shouldn't be doing those stairs, but he never gave up till the end.
And I couldn't talk about the dungeon with you and not ask about Stu Hart. Did you have a lot of interaction with Stu?
Oh, tons. Stu's amazing. He's a great guy.
Any good stories with Stu? Like that stick out?
One of my favorites was there was a guy named Ryan Doki. He was a referee from the Portland, Seattle area, and Dr. Luther, Juggernaut, and Tony Kozina I had brought in for a tour along with Ryan Doki. So Ryan, his nickname was Snowball. It was his first time at the house, and I had taken him up to the house, and Stu was in the kitchen cooking. And if anybody who knows Stu knows new kids get tested constantly by Stu. He loves to have fun with them, and he loves to fuck with them. And Stu had, at 80 years old, I think he was 83 at the time, like just a vice-like grip. Like if he snatched you, you were not getting away. I don't care who you thought you were. Once he decided to hold on, you were not getting away. So I had taken young Mr. Doki up to the house, and we went into the kitchen, said our hellos. I said hello to Stu, and then proceeded to introduce him to Ryan. And Stu grabbed Ryan by the hand to shake it and said, "Oh, you're new to the business, are you? Perhaps I can show you some maneuvers or two." And he proceeded to take Doki to the floor of the kitchen and stretch him right there. And Doki just looked back at me with this, "What's happening right now? What am I supposed to do? I don't know what's going on. Please help me." As Stu started pulling his arm up around his neck, and I'm just going to show you some of our more basic techniques that you can take away with you today.
Oh, that's amazing. You always hear those stories where Stu gets the hand creeping up to the shoulder and you know you're in trouble if he gets a hold, right?
It starts with the handshake. It's the handshake, because once he's got your hand, you're done.
And as for Stu, I mean, damn, man, I've been stretched by him. I've seen him stretch other. It's more fun seeing him stretch other people. I can tell you that from firsthand experience. A funny story was we were filming a show for YTV at the time called like Alpha to Omega. I've never actually seen. I one time on TV caught like the littlest last second of the episode. Anyway, I'd already been stretched. Then Stu was talking to the producers about like other wrestling holds he knew, and they wanted to see some more. And now this is so earlier. The stretching was inside the dungeon on the mat. Now we're outside. And Stu called Harry. They called Harry over, and I was like, "Yes, Harry gets that stretch this time, not me." And then Harry, Harry and I by the ring. Harry just dropped down. Harry like dropped down on the ground, and then like out of a TV show, just like that. I'm just standing there like, TJ, you. And then I remember I kind of kick Harry in the ribs. He's right down at my feet. I go get stretched by Stu on the concrete on the gravel, in like with no shirt on, or this like little skinny tank top. My back is so straight up after. Thanks, Harry. Stu was so generous, man. Like he would. I have a lot of like. I went to a lot of Sunday dinners. I'd spend a lot of like. I remember like there was a lot of times I lived at the house, and there'd be a lot of Monday nights just Stu and I in the kitchen watching Raw, like and just kind of get his take on a lot of things. So I have a lot of really cool moments with Stu.
That's so awesome. Those are like priceless moments to get that type of advice.
Oh, unbelievable!
From Stu watching Raw, like.
And then like like funny things. So one time there's a guy that was in the kitchen. I think he's from California. Came down for the dungeon to train, and so he lived at the guest house across just like not across the street, just on the property. He lived at the guest house. So he was in the kitchen watching Raw with us one night, and Raw in Canada aired. At that time, it wasn't live. It aired 10 to midnight in Calgary. So Stu's down there watching it. And Stu's kind of nodding off a little bit, and this wrestling camp guy notices it. But I've been around the family at this point like 8 years. Like I don't have everything figured out, but I have some things definitely figured out. And I remember this guy like waking Stu up and saying, "Oh, Stu, maybe you should go up to your bed." And I remember Stu was like, "I'll tell you when it's time to go to bed. I'm good." And then like it just was so funny that like I knew like don't bother him. Like he's gonna kind of nod off. Like, man, it's 11:30 at night, man. Like it just is funny. Like this guy thought he's looking out for Stu and only kind of waking him up, helping him out, only to get admonished and maybe and dude. And one thing could lead to another. Next, Stu might be demoing a hold on the guy in the kitchen as we're watching Raw. Like,
that's so great. That's so great. Thank you so much again for everybody joining us as we took a look back at some very fun and fond memories of the legendary Stu Hart. Once again, we hope that you have had a fantastic holiday season. Thank you so much for everything. Please hammer that like and subscribe button. Help us out. On behalf of Mike, I want to wish you all the happiest of holidays, and you have been counted out. Cheers.